This study by Katerina Kako and Pekka Isatalis starts from a simple but uncomfortable question. If close relationships are one of the strongest foundations of human well-being, what happens to them when one person becomes famous? In the music industry, fame is often treated like fuel, something you need to succeed, earn money, and stay visible. But many artists quietly tell a different story. They talk about mistrust, distance, and feeling split between who they really are and who the world expects them to be. Being connected to other people and feeling like you belong is something all humans need, just like food or sleep. When people feel lonely or cut off from others for a long time, it can harm their mental health, make them more likely to misuse alcohol or drugs, and even affect how long they live. What matters most is not how many people you know, but how good those relationships feel. A few close, trusting connections are much more important than having lots of people around but feeling alone. This paper looks behind the spotlight to understand how fame shapes romantic relationships from the inside. The researchers wanted to know how fame is talked about and made meaningful inside artists' romantic relationships. Rather than asking whether fame is good or bad in a simple way, they asked how artists describe fame when they talk about love, trust, privacy, and closeness with a partner. In other words, what stories about fame show up in their relationships, and what do those stories do to intimacy and connection? To answer this, the authors interviewed 11 Finnish commercial music artists aged 21 to 40 with different levels of public recognition, from genre-specific fame to national celebrity. These were long, in-depth interviews, lasting around 45 minutes each, where artists talked about their work, their relationships, and how the two collide. This was not a numbers and spreadsheet study. There were no experiments, no percentages, and no statistical tests. Instead, researchers used a qualitative method called contrapuntal discourse analysis. You can think of this like listening to a piece of music with several melodies playing at once, sometimes harmonizing and sometimes clashing. The researchers looked for pairs of opposing ideas in how artists talked, such as being yourself versus performing a persona, or being open versus staying guarded, and explored how these tensions shaped relationships. What they found was striking. Across the interviews, the dominant way fame was talked about framed it as harmful to romantic relationships, while other, more positive meanings existed but were quieter and less powerful. Artists described fame as creating a celebrity persona that walks into the room before the real person does. This persona attracts attention, assumptions, and expectations, and it often dominates how others respond. Imagine trying to have a quiet, honest conversation while wearing a costume you can never fully take off. Over time, many artists said this made them more cautious, less open, and more distant, both emotionally and socially. Mistrust was a recurring theme. Artists worried about whether new people were interested in them or in their status. Partners, meanwhile, were sometimes affected by rumours, stereotypes, or public gossip, even when none of it was true. This atmosphere makes openness risky, like leaving your front door unlocked in a busy city. As a result, many artists described pulling back, sharing less, and protecting themselves with what one called a kind of armour. The study also found that fame often creates uneven power in relationships. The famous partner is recognised, approached, and centred in social situations, while the other partner can fade into the background. Some artists felt this imbalance made it harder to be vulnerable or to ask for support. After all, stars are not supposed to struggle. Over time, this imbalance could turn closeness into distance, even when there was genuine love. That said, the picture was not entirely bleak. A smaller, quieter story also appeared. Fame can sometimes help relationships. Fame opened doors to new experiences, events, and opportunities, and for some artists, having a partner acted like an anchor, someone with whom they could drop the persona and simply be human. But these positive effects were fragile and usually described alongside, not instead of, the harms. Like all studies, this one has limits. The sample was small and focused only on Finnish artists, mostly men, which means the findings may not apply in the same way to women, other cultures, or other industries. Only the artists were interviewed, not their partners, so we hear one side of the conversation. Still, the depth of the interviews and the consistency of the themes give the findings weight. The methods fit the questions well. If you want to understand lived experience and meaning, listening closely to people's stories is exactly the right tool. The authors are careful not to overclaim, and their conclusions stay grounded in what the artists actually said. The implications are clear and quietly challenging. If fame regularly pushes relationships towards distance, guardedness, and imbalance, then the idea of fame as an unqualified success story starts to crack. The study suggests that music companies, managers, and support services should prepare artists not just for tours and promotion, but for the relational strain that fame brings. It also reminds us, whether famous or not, that intimacy needs space, trust, and equality to survive. There were no conflicts of interest reported, and the research was funded by an academic cultural foundation, reducing concerns about industry pressure or hidden agendas. future research could widen the lens by including partners' voices, looking at different cultures, or exploring other close relationships like friendships or family ties. It could also ask whether social media, whether public and private blur even more, makes these tensions stronger. In the end, the study leaves us with a powerful thought. Fame may shine brightest on the outside, but inside relationships it can act like a glass wall. Everyone can see you, yet real closeness becomes harder to reach.